Reporters lined the courthouse steps, frantically typing on laptops, trying to keep up with the story of the decade. And then came the moment we saw coming. Leonardo DiCaprio, one of the most celebrated actors alive, entered the room. Dark suit and a noticeably shaken expression, taking slow, deliberate steps as he approached the witness stand. Gasps echoed across the gallery. This wasn't a cameo. This was testimony. The judge asked for quiet. DiCaprio sat, took a breath, and stared directly at Sean. Diddy comings across the room. What followed was not a performance. It was a confession of horror of things he saw at an exclusive party he was once invited to, hosted by Diddy himself. I've been to a lot of strange parties in Hollywood. He began, his voice steady but distant. But this was different. This was orchestrated. He described a private mansion, remote and secure, with gated entrances and guests flown in. DiCaprio admitted he was curious. Glamorous. A-list celebrities networking, that sort of thing. But what I walked into was something else entirely. The party, according to DiCaprio, started like any other elite gathering, champagne security, high-end catering, the works. But as the night progressed, he began noticing things that didn't sit right. He said there were rooms guests weren't allowed to enter, people who looked too young to be drinking, and a distinct tension in the air. I felt like I had crossed into a place I shouldn't be, he admitted. Then he dropped the bombshell. There was a back room I wasn't meant to see. Door was cracked. I saw cameras, people lined up, and Diddy was there giving orders. It wasn't a party anymore. It was something darker, something orchestrated. The gallery gasped. Diddy sat motionless, flanked by his legal team. The judge allowed a brief recess as murmurs turned into headlines. DiCaprio's testimony had just shattered the veil that surrounded Diddy's inner circle. And this was only the beginning. After the recess, Leonardo DiCaprio returned to the stand. This time, he looked even more resolute. What he was about to say placed him at the center of one of the most disturbing revelations in the entire case. Saw the back room, he said, pausing. I didn't know if what I was witnessing was illegal, but I knew it wasn't right. The people in there, some of them were nervous, looking at the cameras. They weren't enjoying themselves. They were being watched. He described one girl who couldn't have been older than 20. She was seated on a couch, surrounded by a group of much older men. I caught her for a second, DiCaprio said, and in that glance, she looked terrified. His voice cracked, and the courtroom hung on his every word. That look never left me. Leo then at the party was strangely aggressive. Guests weren't allowed to wander or ask questions. You had zones, he continued. There were security men, some with earpieces, some not, who would politely but firmly redirect you. But it wasn't just the rooms that were off limits. It was the... DiCaprio said that by midnight, he started seeing people disappear for long stretches. Celebrities he recognized suddenly absent and then reappearing looking pale or disoriented. It wasn't just a party. It was like people were being processed. That's the word I kept hearing, processed. The courtroom was frozen in disbelief. Leonardo said he tried to leave early, but was told his driver had been delayed. When he insisted, a man in a black suit pulled him aside and said calmly, "Mr. DiCaprio, we respect you too much for you to walk out like this. Please let us escort you to the lounge." They said it like it was a privilege, Leo recounted, but it felt like a warning. He sat in a glass-walled room for over an hour with no phone signal, just soft jazz playing and a bartender who never spoke. Eventually, a car did arrive, and he was allowed to leave. I never told anyone, he admitted, because I didn't think he would believe me. But now that I see what's coming out, I have to. The judge nodded solemnly, and Diddy's legal team scribbled notes furiously. What DiCaprio saw wasn't a party. It was a machine, and the people inside were its moving parts. After revealing what he saw behind the velvet curtain, DiCaprio was asked how did he reacted to his presence that night. That's when it really got strange. Leo answered, "Because as I was about to leave that back area, Diddy saw me just for a second, and I swear he looked at me like I knew too much. The actor described an intense stare. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even surprise. It was something more calculated, like he was filing me away in his mind. Leonardo admitted he hadn't realized the weight of that moment until later. When people he knew distanced themselves, when film projects stalled, and when calls went unanswered, it was like something invisible pushed me out of certain rooms. He said quietly but deliberately, he began seeing people from that party again in passing at galas and award shows, and they'd give me this strange look like we'd all been marked. Leo said he started having nightmares about that house. He tried to write it off, rationalize it. Maybe it was just a weird Hollywood thing, he told himself. But then I saw the allegations, Cassie's story, the videos, the disappearances. It was around that time he got an anonymous call. They knew I was at the party. The caller said, "You saw more than you should have. Let it die, Leo." Then they hung up. He never told anyone. Not his publicist, not his agent, not even his closest friends. Until now, the courtroom sat in stunned silence. The prosecution asked him one final question. "Why come forward now?" DiCaprio looked directly at Diddy and answered, "Because no one's too big to fall, not even you." And with that, one of Hollywood's biggest stars just helped tear down one of the music industry's most powerful and most men. With the courtroom now fixated on Leonardo DiCaprio's every word, the prosecution shifted their focus. They asked Leo a question that made his hands visibly shake on the stand. "Did anyone ever tell you what was going on behind those closed doors?" DiCaprio nodded slowly. "I didn't want to know," he said, "but someone told me anyway." According to his testimony, a fellow actor whose name was not disclosed in court for safety reasons pulled him aside days after the party. The actor said, "You were lucky you left early. There are things going on at those parties that go way beyond drugs or alcohol. It's about control, blackmail, and lists." Leo looked visibly disturbed, recounting the moment he told me there was a list, a real one, of everyone who had ever been filmed or compromised inside that mansion. It was used to make sure people stayed quiet, stayed obedient, and stayed connected to Diddy. The courtroom gasped. He said it was how favors were traded, not in money. In silence, Leo revealed that after this conversation, he began to notice how many people he knew were somehow tied to Diddy producers. Directors, influencers, people who normally wouldn't even move in the same circles were suddenly backing his projects, showing up to his events, smiling like everything was normal. But the most chilling part came when Leo described the architecture of Diddy's mansion. "I found out the place had been renovated. Not to expand it, but to divide it to make hidden rooms, camera control centers, and places no one ever talked about." He referenced blueprints he'd seen shared among a group chat of concerned industry insiders, as he called them. He didn't show the blueprints in court, but the prosecution confirmed their intention to introduce evidence matching Leo's claims. According to DiCaprio, the real purpose of the parties wasn't social. It was surveillance. They wanted to see how far people would go when they thought no one would find out, he said. But someone always found out. As Leo finished describing the list and the hidden infrastructure of the mansion, the judge called for a 15-minute recess. Diddy sat quietly at the defense table, jaw clenched. But for the first time, he didn't look powerful. He looked exposed. After the break, court resumed. The prosecutor stood and asked DiCaprio a question that immediately shifted the room's energy. "Mr. DiCaprio, did you ever interact with anyone you believed was being held there against their will?" Leo hesitated. Then he nodded. "I was looking for a bathroom," he said, eyes narrowing. "I wandered further than I was supposed to. I opened a door and started down a staircase, and I heard crying." He described the hallway below, the main floor, narrow, dim, lined with storage doors. At the very end was a small room with a tinted glass panel. "I saw a girl inside. She was sitting on the floor, knees to her chest, crying." Leo said she looked no older than 18. "I opened the door a crack and I asked if she was okay. She looked up, panicked, and shook her head. Then a man appeared behind me. Security. He grabbed the door, slammed it shut, and told me I wasn't allowed down there." Leo recalled the man's exact words. "Wrong floor, Mr. DiCaprio. You didn't see nothing. Go back upstairs." He tried to report it later, but as he told the court, no one would touch it. No studio, no media outlet, not even my own team. He described weeks of emotional turmoil after that moment. He had flashbacks. He couldn't focus on his work. He avoided public events for almost a year. I became obsessed with finding out who she was, he said. But it was like she didn't exist. No records, no press, nothing. That's when Leo knew there was something much bigger at play. Someone had the power to erase people. He said solemnly. And if they could do that, they could do anything. When asked if he believed Diddy was aware of the basement, Leo replied, "It wasn't just his house. It was his design. Nothing happened there without his approval." The jury was frozen. DiCaprio was no longer just a witness. He was becoming the voice of dozens, maybe hundreds, who never had the chance to speak. The final testimony of the day took an unexpected turn when the prosecution asked DiCaprio, "Do you recognize the term lighthouse in relation to Diddy's events?" The room fell silent. DiCaprio nodded. "That was the code name," he said. "Everyone who went to those parties knew what it meant. It was a term passed quietly only among those who were invited to the deepest levels of his inner circle." He described how the term came up one night in a private conversation with a Heil music executive. He told me, "You've been to Lighthouse. You know what it means," but I knew he was right. When asked why it was called that, DiCaprio said, "Because you could see everything from inside it, and once you saw it, you couldn't go back." But then came the part no one expected. Leo was asked if he'd ever seen Diddy interacting with any high-level political figures at these events. He took a breath, then said, "Barack Obama." The courtroom exploded in gasps. He clarified, "I never saw Obama at the mansion, but I saw him interact with Diddy at campaign events, fundraisers, private after-parties, and at least once I saw Diddy hand something to someone in Obama's circle, an envelope. It was discreet, but it wasn't nothing." He said he didn't believe Obama was directly involved in any wrongdoing, but added, "It's hard to believe someone that powerful didn't hear the whispers. I didn't sleep. I didn't sleep. I kept the lights on. I had the lights on. I had security sweep my house for bugs. You think I'm being paranoid? Let me tell you something. Paranoia is a survival tool in Hollywood." He admitted that in the years that followed, he tried several times to alert people in power. "I had dinner with a studio head. I said, 'There's something dark happening behind the scenes. Someone's going to get hurt if we don't do something.' He looked me dead in the eye and said, 'You want to be in The Revenant or not?'" According to Leo, every time he tried to speak out, even in subtle ways, it was met with silence, warnings, or veiled threats. One producer reportedly told him, "You say the wrong thing about Diddy, and you'll be uninsurable overnight. They'll cancel you and you won't even know who did it." What pushed him to the edge, however, was an incident in 2021. "I was on a yacht in Capri," he said, "just a few close friends. I thought someone brought up the lighthouse again. They said, 'It's back. He's starting again.' That night, Leo excused himself and walked to the edge of the yacht, thinking about jumping. I had spent years pretending nothing happened, smiling on red carpets, accepting awards, all while knowing that somewhere someone was still trapped, still being hurt because I didn't say anything." He didn't jump, but he made a vow, "Testify no matter what it cost me." The courtroom sat in stunned silence. Diddy shifted uncomfortably at the defense table, whispering to his lawyer, but it was too late. Was no longer a Hollywood star. He was a whistleblower and he wasn't done yet. The prosecution then produced a sealed manila envelope. DiCaprio's face changed the moment he saw it. "Is that the file?" he asked quietly. The attorney nodded. Leo explained, "This file contains messages, screenshots, notes. I collected them over the years from people who reached out to me there from victims." He was never supposed to have the file. According to his testimony, it was handed to him in 2019 by a former assistant to a powerful record executive. "She was shaken when she gave it to me. She said, 'If I disappear, give this to someone who can't be silenced.' I asked her, 'Why me?' She said, 'Because you still have a soul.'" The file, as described in court, included transcripts of parties' security logs and names of underage individuals who had allegedly been seen entering Diddy's estate and never leaving publicly. Leo refused to say most of their names out loud. "They deserve privacy." Some are still trying to live their lives. Some are still too scared to talk. But one person reached out directly. Her name was redacted in court, but DiCaprio called her Hope. She had been trafficked through connections in the entertainment industry and claimed she'd spent 3 months in Diddy's circle before escaping through what she called a favor from a guilty friend. Leo read one of her messages aloud. If anyone ever learns what he did to us, they'll bury him. But they'll bury us too. I just want someone to say out loud what happened, even if no one believes it. DiCaprio then looked directly at the judge and said, "That's why I'm here." He finished the segment of his testimony by saying he believed Empire was built not just on music, but on fear, silence, and shame. The man can dance, he said, but it's the shadows that move with him. You need to watch. The judge called for another short recess, but the courtroom didn't move. No one spoke, not even the defense. As the jury returned, it became evident that something had shifted in the room. Diddy had grown visibly pale. His team shuffled papers and one attorney whispered furiously into his ear. Diddy slammed a fist onto the table, then stood up. With the judge's approval, Diddy's attorney requested to approach the bench. A brief sidebar ensued. No one knows what was said, but when the attorneys returned to their seats, the prosecution stood and asked Leonardo for one final statement. Leo cleared his throat. "I'm not here because I hate Sherlock Holmes. I'm here because I believe in accountability. I believe in light." He paused. "This trial isn't about fame. It's not about Hollywood. It's about a system that let one man do anything he wanted for decades because he was rich, connected, and dangerous. It's about the people he hurt while the rest of us looked away." Then Leonardo turned directly to Diddy. "You once told me the only thing people care about is the party. Well, the party's over, and now it's time to clean up the mess." The room went still. Diddy muttered something under his breath, something caught by a courtroom microphone. He said, "This ain't over. None of this is real. They're all actors." To which Leo replied softly, "Then you finally understand what it's like to be in one of my movies. Only this time you don't get a script." The judge adjourned court for the day. Reporters rushed out. The jury sat frozen, and Diddy, for the first time in a long time, looked powerless. As Leonardo DiCaprio exited the courtroom under police escort, he passed a small crowd of onlookers. Some applauded, some just watched in disbelief. But everyone, whether they believed him or not, knew one thing. The trial had changed. And so,
1 hour ago, Ashton Kutcher finally speaks about what Diddy did to Brittany Murphy that night. In a development sending shock waves across both Hollywood and federal law enforcement channels. Confidential sources have confirmed that actor Ashton Kutcher is now cooperating with authorities in the rapidly expanding criminal investigation into Sean Diddy Combs, an investigation that has now reopened the long-dormant case of actress Brittany Murphy's sudden and controversial death. The revelation comes amid sealed testimony proceedings in Los Angeles County Superior Court where multiple witnesses, some previously gagged by NDAs, have reportedly begun submitting corroborating materials, including personal messages, metadata-verified footage, and forensic documents implicating high-profile figures in a network of abuse, coercion, and calculated silence. Kutcher's name, once mentioned only in passing as a former romantic partner of Murphy, is now appearing in formal affidavit. And according to 2 individuals briefed on the contents of one such filing, the actor may hold critical insight into a closed-door culture that Murphy herself once described as predatory, paranoid, and inescapable. At the center of this reawakening case is a single chilling pattern. Young high-profile women dying under medical circumstances later deemed unremarkable, but which upon re-examination present eerie anomalies and so to ignore. Let's go back to December 25, 2009. Brittany Murphy, 32, was pronounced dead after collapsing in the bathroom of her Hollywood Hills home. The cause acute pneumonia compounded by anemia and a reported cocktail of over-the-counter medications. 5 months later, her husband, screenwriter Simon Monjack, would die in the exact same house. The reported cause also pneumonia and anemia. Initial media coverage was brief, nearly clinical. There are no sweeping investigations, no subpoenas, no follow-ups. But the questions never left because in the months leading to her death, Murphy had told friends she believed she was being watched, that she was being poisoned, that something was closing in. Now, over a decade later, those warnings are being reviewed not as paranoid delusion, but as testimonial indicators. And Ashton Kutcher, he's being recontextualized not simply as an ex-boyfriend, but as a potential first-hand witness to the social infrastructure that allegedly surrounded Murphy in her final months. Between 2002 and 2003, Murphy and Kutcher were romantically linked. They were seen at premieres events and, according to several reports, even wore matching rings. But then a rapid split. No official statement, no scandal, just a sudden appearance of Kutcher with Demi Moore. Industry sources at the time labeled it a clean break. But the timeline was never clean. Here's where it gets darker. Around the same time, Kutcher was building an increasingly visible friendship with Sean Diddy Combs. The two co-hosted parties collaborated on entertainment projects and were known for organizing private Hollywood after-hours events, some of which, according to recent affidavit, operated without oversight with NDAs required upon entry and cameras expressly prohibited. Those events, now under federal scrutiny, are believed to have involved coerced participation, illegal surveillance, and potentially trafficked individuals. Multiple sources claim Murphy was invited to one of those parties and that she declined. The consequences, if connected, could be fatal. Friends reported that Murphy began avoiding certain foods, refusing delivery orders, and insisting on watching meals be prepared. She swapped traditional locks for fingerprint scanners. She said she was being followed. And then silence until 2013, when Murphy's father privately commissioned toxicology testing on a preserved strand of her hair. The results, abnormal levels of heavy metals, including beryllium and antimony elements commonly found in pesticides and rodenticides. Still, no investigation was reopened. No charges filed. No official acknowledgement of foul play. Murphy's mother, Sharon, rejected the findings, continued living in the same home, and later sold the property without ever publicly pressing for reinvestigation. Her silence, once seen as grief, is now being interpreted by some as something more calculated. And Ashton, until recently, he remained largely removed from the narrative. But that changed when the Diddy investigation gained federal traction in late 2024. Suddenly, Kutcher's name began surfacing. Not in gossip columns, but in depositions. According to one source close to the case, Kutcher has provided digital materials and first-hand recollections that challenge the accepted timeline surrounding Murphy's final year. What does he know, and why is he speaking now? That question, once rhetorical, is now critical. Because for Ashton Kutcher, a man who built his second act as a tech investor and anti-human trafficking advocate, silence was becoming unsustainable. In recent weeks, as mounting allegations engulfed Sean Diddy Combs, Ashton's proximity to the music mogul became a focal point of public scrutiny. But behind closed doors, something had shifted years earlier. According to multiple insiders familiar with the case, Kutcher began distancing himself from Diddy as early as 2016. Their once public friendship faded. Collaborative appearances ceased. Sources now claim that Kutcher received information, possibly visual evidence implicating Diddy in activities far beyond industry gossip. But there was more than just moral distance. There was fear. Because within weeks of receiving what one source described as unshakable material, Kutcher's team began enhancing security measures, vetting all outgoing communications, and notably reviewing his past connections, including those involving Brittany Murphy. And what they found allegedly rattled him. Reports suggest that Kutcher's name appeared in private logs tied to multiple exclusive parties hosted between 2002 and 2005 events that Brittany Murphy had repeatedly warned friends about. While Kutcher has never been publicly accused of wrongdoing, his presence at these gatherings may have placed him closer to the mechanics of Murphy's downfall than previously assumed. Which raises the next question. What exactly did Brittany see? Recollections from friends paint a chilling portrait. Weeks before her death, Murphy reportedly told a close confidant, "I should never have gone near them. I said no, and now they're watching." She became reclusive. She avoided events. Roles dried up. According to casting memos from that time, she was labeled difficult. Others described her as fragile. But those who truly knew her say she was afraid. One studio executive, speaking under condition of anonymity, stated there was pressure to drop her. Nobody said why. It just came from the top. And then came the smear. Tabloids began to portray Murphy as erratic. Claims of substance abuse, financial instability, and marital chaos with Simon Monjack dominated headlines. But behind the noise was a woman trying to protect herself and possibly trying to tell someone what she had uncovered. Now, as Kutcher re-enters the spotlight, not as a celebrity, but as a cooperating witness, authorities are reportedly reviewing years of digital correspondence, including unreleased voicemails, encrypted messages, and archive footage that may establish a connection between Murphy's warnings and the mechanisms of influence operating behind Diddy's empire. What's more startling is what's come to light about Monjack Murphy's husband. Once dismissed as a fame chaser with a fabricated resume, Monjack's death mirrored Britain's with disturbing precision. But court filings unsealed last week revealed that Monjack may have been in possession of hard copies of sensitive documents Murphy had collected materials that vanished the night he died. Murphy's father later alleged those documents included a CD labeled Only Venice, rumored to contain video footage from an unnamed party in 2003. The CD was never found. Still, investigators now believe that Britney's death and Monjack's were not isolated tragedies, but pressure points within a system engineered to silence dissent. And yet, the question persists. Why now? Why is Kutcher stepping forward? The answer may lie in another death, that of Kim Porter. Porter, Diddy's former partner, and the mother of 3 of his children, died in 2018 under similarly sudden and suspicious circumstances. Official cause pneumonia. But close friends claimed she had been preparing to publish a tell-all memoir. Like Murphy, Porter had grown fearful in the months before her death. And like Murphy, she left behind whispers about secrets, about parties, about names. As those whispers became a chorus, Kutcher reportedly reached out to legal advisors, expressing concern not only about what he knew, but about the safety of others who had remained silent. In early 2025, that concern became action. Kutcher, accompanied by counsel, met with federal investigators in a closed session. He handed over encrypted backups and testified under oath. According to those familiar with the meeting, his statement included direct references to Murphy's paranoia, the party culture they had both witnessed, and his own growing awareness of the connections that now seem impossible to ignore. This is no longer a case of rumor. It's a case of pattern, power, and systemic silencing. And for the first time in over a decade, those closest to Brittany Murphy are beginning to believe the truth she tried so desperately to share may finally come to light. The curtain is lifting, but the stage is not empty. As new eyes turn toward Brittany Murphy's case, the question is no longer just what happened to her, but rather who knew? And as this question echoes louder across courtroom halls and digital archives, it's becoming